hello, hello. Am I getting better at dinging the bell loudly enough? I like stared at it and I'm like, we're going to get it this time. So welcome so much. Thank you all for being here at Downtown Rotary. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in reciting the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? I would now like to invite past President Jesse Schmidt for our invocation.
Thank you, President Cindy, fellow Rotarians. The mic is never low enough for me. So I ask you, please join me now in bowing your heads. Lord, you have given us and many in our community so very much. You have given us a desire to do good, to be honest, to serve others, and to faithfully fulfill our obligation to our neighbors. Help us as Rotarians and humans to do good. Help us as Rotarians and humans to be honest and ethical in our dealings. Help us as Rotarians and humans to serve others. And help us as Rotarians and humans to faithfully fulfill our obligations and neighbors to our community, our nation, and our world. In your name, amen.
I'd like to thank our greeters today. They always do such a wonderful job, hopefully making all of you feel welcomed and included in our time together. Are you with me? Joni's with me. Can you hear me? I'd love now to take a few moments and welcome our guests. We actually have time to welcome each guest individually, so I'm going to start with Rotarian Ryan Tysdal. You have a guest. Please wait for the microphone and invite your guest to stand and introduce he or she. Thank you, Ryan.
Howdy. Good morning. My guests today are Mike VanBuskirk, Mike Knudsen, and Autumn Kaufhold from VanBuskirk Companies.
Please help offer a Rotary welcome. Dean Karski, you have a guest.
President Cindy, fellow Rotarians, my guest today is Madeline Miller. She's from the Link, so she walked all the way down the road here. She's interested in membership, so she wanted to check out what Rotary is about. So if you'd welcome her, please.
Matt Paulson, you have brought a guest today.
Thank you, President Cindy and fellow Rotarians. My guest today is Erin Gonseth. Erin is Mark Beat's Vice President of Finance. She joined her team about a year ago, and she's been a great addition to our team.
Welcome. Mike May, you have brought a guest today.
Happy Monday, Rotarians and President Cindy. I have Jay Perry with the USD Sioux Falls campus with me today.
Thank you. And Jay, I believe everyone will get to know you a little bit more next week as part of our program. So thank you in advance for that. Joel Dykstra, you have a guest.
Thank you, President Cindy. My guest today is Josh Fenton, who's the newly in position commissioner of the Summit League and a new resident of Sioux Falls. And you'll get to know a lot more about Josh in 2 weeks when he's our program.
Wonderful, Josh. Thank you for being here. Joni Ekstrom, you have a guest.
Thank you, President Cindy. I would like to introduce Marissa Marshall. She's the Development Director at the SDSU Foundation. Go Jacks.
Ryan Martin, where are you? All the way across the room, Angie. Ryan, you have a guest.
President Cindy, fellow Rotarians, I'd like to welcome Laura Arnett with a marketing agency that's new to Sioux Falls, Flynn Wright. So welcome, Laura.
Welcome. We also have 3 roaming Rotarians, Dwayne, Stacy, and Lauren. Thank you all for being here today. Glad to have you, of course. If there were any guests that were not listed, I certainly want to extend my warm Rotary welcome to all of you as well. A quick piece of Rotary business before we move into our program. If you have not seen your emails recently, or you have not found your most recent Rotary email, the registration for our annual program with the Sanford International, that registration is now open. I can share with you that Andy North has enthusiastically agreed to be part of that program. We will also have a pro and another member of the Sanford team involved. So it's a not want to miss program. And if you haven't gotten signed up, I believe the deadline is September 2nd. Did I get that right, Angie? Okay, I'm getting the nod. Sign up by September 2nd. Okay. Well, we're going to get to have a lot of fun today with our program. We've got lots and lots of time to learn all about what's happening in the retail landscape of Sioux Falls. I'd like to invite our moderator, Jodi Schwan from SiouxFalls.Business, up to the stage along with her panelists. Come on up, everybody up. We're ready to go. Raquel and Ryan, they're all going to enlighten us on the ever-evolving retail landscape of Sioux Falls. Jodi, once everybody is settled in, I will let you introduce our presenters and guide us through today's conversation. Thank you all for being here.
How are we doing? Is this on? Maybe? Yes. All right. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you so much for having us. I know all 3 of us are looking forward to this discussion. And I was telling someone from Ryan's team when I walked in, guys, I really think they could wake the 3 of us up in the middle of the night, like put us on this stage and say, talk about retail. And like, we could do this because we live and breathe it. And definitely one of the best parts of my job is that I get to bother, as I often put it, these guys all the time as far as what they're working on. But retail is for sure the most popular content area at SiouxFalls.Business. Our readers just love to know every detail, and I know you all do too. Cindy, I meant to ask, we are taking questions from the crowd, right? Yes? Okay. So I will leave some time for your questions. Be thinking of those. Generally, when I open it up for retail-related questions, everybody has one, whether they choose to ask it or not. Hopefully, I'll get to some of yours here during the program. I'm going to do something a little different. I am not a huge fan of just sitting up here and reading through people's bios. So instead of doing that, I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, tell you a bit about themselves, but then also how you got into this industry, into commercial real estate in the first place. Because not many people grow up or go to college thinking that they're going to get into commercial real estate. It generally happens over the progression of a career. So Raquel Blount with Lloyd Companies, I'll start with you.
Thank you. And Jesse, the mic is never low enough and the chair is never, so I feel your pain. I'm Raquel Blount. I'm the Vice President of Commercial Real Estate with Lloyd Companies. I am just at 20 years with the company this month, so we're pretty excited, and the company itself just celebrated its 50th anniversary, so big year for the company. Jodi's right. I was a zoology major at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. Didn't have commercial real estate or real estate experience, background, thoughts of it. But as I got out of college and moved around the country a little bit, and I was pursuing some medical science-based and got an opportunity to take a job with General Growth Properties. And at the time, they were the largest shopping center developer. So started with them in Cedar Rapids, went to Cedar Rapids, but then ended up in Mankato and met my husband, who was with Orion Food Systems here in Sioux Falls. So came to Sioux Falls, and I stayed with General Growth, and I was traveling. Had a lot. Yep. I was a regional with them. I had the West Coast territory, and I was doing specialty leasing at that time, running their kiosk programs in shopping centers across the country, or mostly West Coast. So then we had our daughter, and travel became very, very challenging. And he said, well, you enjoy this real estate and leasing, and why don't you look at doing commercial real estate here in Sioux Falls? So I had the opportunity to meet Dennis Bresky and work with Dennis for 3 years, and then made the transition to Lloyd Companies. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful community to be lucky enough to land in commercial real estate with the aggressive growth and all the new developments and everything going on, which we'll get to.
I actually think a background in zoology is perfect for commercial real estate. Don't you?
Sometimes, yes.
Is off, right? So Ryan Tysdal, also an interesting career path that.
Well,
led you
I was
to
a
where you
music
are.
major in college, so that fits well with commercial real estate too. I'm a lifelong resident, grew up in Sioux Falls, grew up just east of Sioux Falls in the Brandon School District, so I attended Brandon. Went to Augustana College, and after college spent a decade in the advertising business, and then 10 years ago joined Lloyd Companies, and I've been at VanBuskirk Companies now 5 years. So it's a busy time to be in real estate, and we're excited to share the good, bad, and the ugly.
Long I've been doing this. I remember when you started your career and
Yeah.
coming out of radio, and
Yep.
watching
Yep.
you grow has been really fun, and see the deals that you both have been able to amass, and there are a lot of them. So I'm going to take a big picture look with these guys now at sort of the state of the market. You may have seen the mid-year report out recently from vendor companies that showed shrinking vacancy in the retail sector, which I know you have experienced on the ground too. And it's important to remember that sometimes it looks like space is not occupied when in fact there is a deal in process and there is something coming. So it's not giving you the complete picture, even I don't think, as far as the state of the market. Ryan, I'll start this one with you. What are you experiencing as far as occupancy and vacancy are trending?
I think vacancy is probably trending down, partly because existing space is filling, and with construction costs where they are and interest rates where they are, creating new product is somewhat challenging, or at least challenging in a sense of getting the rents you would need to make some of these projects work. So as we're continuing to see a lot of vacancies fill, and Sioux Falls hasn't had near the vacancy problems that I think a lot of markets across the country over the last, just few years, but even decade. You went into some markets and they were just littered with vacant spaces, big boxes empty, small shop space empty, where Sioux Falls, generally speaking, I mean, once we get a vacancy, it backfills, or at least there's a deal kind of in the works many times, without a huge lag time. While these deals aren't always quick, we just have traditionally not had a lot of the big vacancy that some markets have.
Yeah, we see those big boxes go out, the Kmart's, the Shopkos. Before long, somebody's filling them.
I got a call last week, a national storage group looking for big boxes. And I said, the big boxes in Sioux Falls didn't last long. And generally speaking, all sold somewhat quickly for really legit prices. I mean, in some markets where there's, a big box Kmart just kind of sitting there, no one wants to buy it, there's nothing to do with it. We certainly didn't have that in Sioux Falls. Our big boxes went under contract.
Mm-hmm. Raquel has a mix of new construction and existing available. I'm curious on the new construction side. The construction costs have got to be difficult. What are you seeing as far as interest in that new space versus existing? Is the new space filling up? And if so, is it taking longer, or what's the trending?
We were fortunate. We hit a good timing with Empire Place, which is the new development in front of the Empire Mall, having the ability to get Chipotle, Chick-fil-A, Chase Bank, and then just with timing in retail. I mean, I would say last year we kind of saw a resurgence in brick and mortar, people were really anxious to get out and shop outside of online, and just kind of bringing that back. Plus, the retailers weren't having to discount as much as they traditionally had. So you weren't seeing those deep discounting. So their sales were naturally going up. They were able to grow. There was kind of a air of, okay, bring it back, maybe adjusting some prototype sizing, things like that. But we saw an emergence of new kind of service retail, and anyone that had kind of a collaborative or any type of interactive was really hitting the market well. So we were fortunate. We put 2 new buildings up. They're both about 10,000 square feet. They're 100% occupied. Just that mall traffic, the 41st Street, the right place, right time. We are under construction on 2 more buildings to finish out the project. We are actively negotiating with a few users, but I would say in the last probably 3-4 months, it seems that the retail environment is kind of shifting again. I think it's so hard for these retailers with product. At first there was product lulls and they couldn't get merchandise. So then you saw a lot of the boxes overbuying and stocking up, and now they have oversupply. So now they are talking discounting, and
The discounting is definitely picking up.
yes. And just anytime you start talking recession and higher interest rates and you get a little bit of that, people tend to naturally pull back a little bit. So I think in terms of the national retail, 6-8 months to a year ago, we were really seeing a lot of forward momentum, a lot of activity. And it's not that we're not today, because, we're getting calls. There are new concepts. There's, lots of things that we're working on. I just think it is probably softening somewhat from 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about their role is that it's not just about leasing or selling the space, that they often stay in touch with these tenants and these owners throughout to see how they're doing, which directly relates to, are they going to renew the lease, and then what are we going to have for availability?
Yeah.
What are you hearing from those existing retailers as far as specifically that Sioux Falls market performance?
Yeah. So fortunately, that new product, having to get that top rent, as Ryan, mentioned, with the combination of good co-tenancy and that traffic, and the diverse nature of having people come from Minnesota, Iowa, they're performing very, very well. I mean, a lot of the new things that we've brought to the market in the last couple of years, we're hearing record sales, the Freddy's at Dolly are continuing to break different metrics and store openings. And, certainly we saw great success with Crumble Cookie and, some of those retailers. Sioux Falls in general, we don't really see a lot of nationals go out of business unless it's kind of a corporate bankruptcy situation. Traditionally, we've been the last to close for a lot of the chain retailers that, nationally will start to close across the country. They'll send merchandise to Sioux Falls until, they are done operating. So we've been very lucky. The food service continues to dominate a lot of the inquiry and just, growth in the market. But fortunately, last year, we also saw an increase in kind of going back to soft goods retail and just really across the board.
People are buying clothes and shoes again, and not
Mhm.
just athleisure. So that's been helpful. Ryan, what are you hearing from your existing relationships?
So retailers in Sioux Falls, it's a common tale that Sioux Falls is a top performing market for most retailers. Part of that is Sioux Falls has the largest geographic draw of any market between Minneapolis and Denver. So, I remember back in college, eons ago, I worked at Best Buy, and on the weekends, I bet 80% of the customers were not Sioux Falls residents. And they're driving 2 and 3 hours to come shopping in Sioux Falls. And I've heard Ron tell the story about when Costco was looking at the market, and at first they weren't sure, but then he's driving them through the Sam's parking lot, showing them the numbers on all the license plates and how far people are traveling to come shop and do their commerce in Sioux Falls. So that's, I mean, quite a tale. And at Lake Lorraine, a lot of the retailers report sales numbers, and talking to friends at Simon who own the Empire Mall, most every tenant at Simon has to report sales. It's a real common thing, for retailers that have 1,000 stores. Sioux Falls might be in the top 10 stores out of or the number one store in some cases. Like to Raquel's point, when Pier 1 was going out of business, Sioux Falls was their number one store in the company out of over 500 stores. And I mean, even as they had announced some restructuring efforts, Sioux Falls was safe because it's the number one store. But then when COVID hit and they just instantly ran out of cash, that's where, as Raquel talks, when the whole corporation goes away, that's where Sioux Falls will feel it. But even
same thing, top of the company.
Correct. But even in that case, when Pier 1 went away, there was a retailer waiting at the door, and we had a letter of intent to the landlord before Sioux Falls had even had final days in their windows.
Meanwhile, it's a symbol of retail today that we swapped out Pier 1 for Dollar Tree.
Yes.
Just saying, like that's who's growing in retail today.
The discounters are the ones growing.
And they're still growing. Yeah. You both went to Recon, the annual retail real estate conference, where I'm not going to say a lot of these deals are made, but they definitely progress, right? And I've been there many times. It's a fun event, and nobody really knew exactly what to expect this year, which was partly why we didn't invest to go, because I didn't think there would be a lot of deals to announce that day. But it turned out that you all were very busy, had a lot of conversations, but we have not caught up since then. This was in May. So Ryan, I'll have you start. How are those follow-up conversations happening?
So this year, I'd say I had triple the number of meetings I normally had at the Vegas convention, and a lot of new deals in the works. And, I remember getting into this business when Craig Lloyd said, it's not rocket science. This is a relationships business. And even when you're working with national retailers who have thousands of stores, it becomes a very small world very quickly. You're working with the same deal makers, the same brokers. It is definitely, you have connections to get these deals here. And, so you're meeting in Vegas, you're, creating the idea of a deal, or you're working through, in some cases, you have a deal in the works, and I feel like you can accomplish more in, a 15-minute meeting than a month's worth of emails sometimes. And, kind of getting back to that in person, the vibe was very, very good from the retailers and brokers, because again, it was the first time that group had really assembled in a couple years. So it's being able to sit across the table from a landlord or from a retailer, look into their eyes, figure out if we have a deal or not, things you can't accomplish on a Zoom call or emails or phone. So it was, generally speaking, a very upbeat vibe. The attendance was down a little bit at this show from past years, but the deal making was just as strong as ever. I think a lot of the attendance down, there's a lot of attorneys and those types that attend that show that they were in Vegas, but they said, I don't really want to pay, $2,500 to go to a show. So I'll just sit outside in the cafeteria and meet with my client there. So I think those numbers are a little skewed, but I would say the level of deal making, and I'll let Raquel talk, I think it was just as strong or stronger as ever.
And how are the conversations progressing now?
Yeah, you want to stay with Ryan? Oh, okay. I too thought it was right-sized this year. It just sort of was more manageable, but more productive. It was very interactive, you were able to get from A to B just a little bit easier, and the conversations continue. We had exposure to some new concepts, some new opportunities, new people into the business. So that was pretty exciting. I know that my very first meeting I had when the doors open, we are in process of finalizing a purchase agreement for them to come to the market. So, it was very productive. It did feel like you were able to get more appointments and be active.
I want to talk a little about the retail center of the city, which of course continues to be 41st and Louise. I was thrilled. I know our friends at Empire Mall were thrilled, and you all probably were too, that we finally could announce, yes, Dillard's is coming, and we could give you a timeline. They are even under construction now. I'm told that if you go out there, you'll see some site work happening. So I want to talk, Raquel, about the state of 41st Street and Louise. Obviously, we touched on Empire Place. Louise Avenue has some vacancy, which is interesting to me, and some big opportunities. But Is it still that those new nationals want to be by the mall? What are you hearing about the performance of the mall, and what's your take in general on that 41st and Louise area?
Yeah, I would tell you the vacancy directly relates to the fact that it's in that national developments, and we have so many more restrictions. So we've had multiple offers on an interest in some of the vacancies on Louise Avenue, but unfortunately, when you're dealing with their restrictive covenants and their OEAs and ECRs, and those anchors really have a way of, kind of controlling the area and what can come in and what can't. And so we've really had to deal with that extensively in some of those areas. But, we still hear from many that, if they're going to enter our market and they haven't been in the region, or, that's where they want to be. And if they can't locate in that area, they'll just skip the market and wait for that opportunity to open up. They don't generally say, well, we're going to come to Sioux Falls, so we'll just find the best spot that's out there and available, and then that's what we'll do. If it doesn't meet all of their criteria and it doesn't happen to line up with, and a lot of times it is
Right.
wanting
it's a
to
real
be
estate decision first, almost, in a market second.
Yep.
I think Chick-fil-A and Chipotle would be great examples of
Right.
that.
Yep.
If we can't get the spot we want, we're not coming.
Yep. And that was that right timing. Just so, and then once they come and they realize the success they can have, that's, then when they'll roll out their
Then it's
growth
why weren't we
plan.
here 5 years ago? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because those new nationals, to a person, when we get to follow up with them, they can never believe the performance of the market. And
Right.
then it's generally not too long before store 2 comes in, which we've seen with Chipotle, and I suspect at some point our friends at Chick-fil-A will decide it's time for.
It's going to be a little bit longer,
They
but
just take their time. Ryan, what's your take on the mall in general, and that 41st and Louise corridor?
So many times, national retailers, especially when they're bringing their first store to the market, they pull out a map and they put a pin right on the Empire Mall and they say, how close can you get me to this? And that's usually how most conversations start. It's how a lot of the Lake Lorraine retail conversations started. That group of retailers together made that project go. They wanted something near the mall. They wanted, it took every single one of those deals for that project to happen. If one fell out of bed, the whole house of cards went down. So, these deals, they're difficult to begin with when you talk, like Raquel did, of restrictions and exclusive uses, and this retailer doesn't want to be by that retailer, and this retailer only comes if these 2 other are there. And so you're kind of building this house of cards until the day everyone signs a lease and you break ground and you deliver.
Yeah. And yet you go out there. You look at the Empire Mall campus, for instance, and there is vacancy, right? There are vacant buildings, some of which have been there for a while.
Yeah.
But is all of this in play? And I realize you don't represent them, but as far as why we've seen them stay empty for seemingly a long time.
Well, Simon can be challenging to get deals done with. But
The largest retail landlord in the country.
yeah,
right?
they're quick to
you
say we're the
have
largest
those
landlord in the
layers of
world. And,
things. Yeah.
but I coincidentally was in Indianapolis on a short vacation last week and had a meeting at Simon's headquarters in downtown Indy about a deal that I'm working on one of the pads outside the mall. And they were just glowing to be able to talk about Dillard's finally. And they, and then they're quick to say, and we're going to want more rent because we have Dillard's. And, they do have a lot going for them. They have 9 million visitors a year and, puts Mount Rushmore to shame. But it's, they still have quite a nucleus, and seeing what Raquel has built out in front of the mall. Where Chick-fil-A is, that is the hood ornament of retail South Dakota. Ground zero, it doesn't get better than that. And I've said, if somebody isn't going to go there, they're not coming to the market because it doesn't get better than that. And it's exciting to see what she's created there and that the demand continues. And even, as you talk about vacancy along Louise Avenue, when Raquel had the Dress Barn space go vacant a couple years ago, it's like I brought her a letter of intent within a week to backfill it. And the problem was it wasn't big enough. The space wasn't big enough.
Yeah.
So it's things like that it just has to be the right fit, the right timing for things to line up.
There's a little bit of a Goldilocks complex on some of these properties too, that I think sit too long. There's some issue why, right? I think of like the Royal Fork space or the Payless space, right? There are reasons maybe why.
And it's ironic because even our retail buildings that are literally in between the Empire Mall and 41st Street, you know, because we have those outlot pads, there were certain deals, and we have nationals that won't go into that development because they don't have the frontage. So, you know, then you talk about going on the backside of the Empire. I mean, sometimes these retailers are just exhausting and extremely particular.
Yes.
But I mean,
it's a competitive business, and you can tell, especially at the national level, you know, when you talk to them, the numbers have to work, and the sites have to make sense, and they're not going to settle, right? And then they're going to take their time, which maybe we should bring the group kind of into the fold on that, because I think especially post-COVID, you know, retail deals have always taken a long time, and now I feel like they're taking an exceptionally long time.
In some cases, I mean, you had retailers that were through a lot of 2020 grounded. They weren't flying. Their deal makers weren't flying. Their real estate people were not traveling. So again, you know, they're not going to, in most cases, they're not going to do a deal until they have boots on the ground, until they walk through the building or walk on the land and have, because there's some intangibles. You feel it or you don't once you get there. And, you know, it's hard to do that on a Zoom call or on Google Maps. You know, there's a fellow broker, he jokes, he said, your site in Sioux Falls, or in general, he said, your site's only good as it looks on Google Maps. And there's some truth to that. I mean, they don't want to, retailers don't always want to see a cornfield across the street. You know, if they say it looks too green, they don't want to see your alfalfa field across the road from where you want them to put a national big box store.
Meanwhile, I've said for a long time, build Trader Joe's in the middle of a cornfield and they will still crush it. So too bad we can't convince them of that.
The Dollar General model.
Yeah. Right.
yeah, they wouldn't go behind Chipotle, Chick-fil-A, Chase Bank.
Right. Yeah. So Trader Joe's is worried that you won't come because there's
Yeah.
a Chick-fil-A in front of them. But that gives you insight into what these guys, the story that they have to try and tell. So, yep. I want to shift and talk East Side. I'm sure we have some East Siders here. It's been fun to see the momentum of the East Side, and you two were very early pioneers. And Ryan, you're still pioneering up there, but we'll start with Dolly.
She created it all. We
No,
should kiss her feet every day because she has made an incredible.
How many
development
targets
of
were
East
done
Side.
in the country the year that they came?
Yeah, 3.
3. So it was
Yeah.
huge, and
And-
it's built on itself.
We were very, very fortunate in 2007 to be able to keep that deal in place and then have occur what has happened. But the opening of the interchange at I-90 has been, it's done wonders for the East Side. It's done wonders for the Dolly retailers. I mean, if you ask them, like we were talking earlier, Christopher and Banks, they actually outperformed at Dolly, outperformed the Empire Mall store, and was top in the region. I mean, they were devastated that they had to close that store because it was, you know, they did fantastic. And so that was tough, but
Yeah, PetSmart is doing fabulous as a
All-
second store. I mean,
yeah, pet retail, all pet retail is doing really, really well. Everybody bought something during COVID to
yeah, that they now
feed
have to feed
and raise and
yeah.
yeah. So that has been definitely a category that has seen explosive growth, and even like pet boutiques and everything else, and dog grooming and you name it. So, but that's good. It's, allowed opportunity, but East Side has just really been transformational. And the difference between today and 10 years ago on the East Side is kind of what we're envisioning is going to happen next, probably up in Northwest. But opening up that corridor and your project by Menards, I mean, that creation of that synergy again, because at Dolly, our phase 1 is nearing completion. We're working phase 2, but now with the interchange and the traffic patterns, and I mean, it's just really opened up Foss Fields to huge growth and just creating that second destination. I mean, truly in 5 years, 10 years, I mean, East Side will have everything that the West Side has.
Yes. So the next development that VanBuskirk is working on is the Foss Fields development just north of Menards. So again, kind of that next wave of larger national retail. We're working with the city to improve East 6th Street out to Veterans Parkway, which will again create another corridor into downtown Sioux Falls, which probably lines up rather well with the Steel District, and now having another path into the city each morning for commuters. But these deals, I mean, they're long deals. We're working on 2024 deals, trying to be open by holiday of 24 with a lineup of junior box retailers, and it's again a house of cards until
Much
it's
like
all
Lake
done.
Lorraine, right? They've all got to fit together.
Yep,
Yeah.
it all has to fit together. It all has to come together at one time. But for years I always said to Raquel, the first one through the wall gets the bloodiest. And as you look year in and year out, how she added to Dolly, it was like a new retailer every single year. And now you have that nucleus, and you have I talked to a broker out of Chicago. This was probably 2 months ago, and he said, if there any retailer that isn't in or around the Empire Mall that isn't looking at a second store in East Sioux Falls is behind the curve, because he believed in it that much that and as we talk about the small world it is doing deals in Sioux Falls, a lot of these brokers who don't live here but they've done many deals here, they understand that East and West Sioux Falls are a little bit different, that there's different traffic patterns, different demographics, and that there is a need and a demand for multiple stores. And for a lot of retailers, it's we know adding a second store in the market is going to cannibalize somewhat our West Side store, but if we can only cannibalize it by this much and be back to pre-second store levels within 5 years, I mean it's all metrics to them, and they have done it 1,000 times before and they're masters at it. But it's exciting to see them all talking about the East Side and what's coming together there. And
and then you look at Veterans Parkway, which is far from done, and all of that
Yes.
commercial land that's going to open up. It's almost crazy to think about. And it kind of leads me to my next question, which is, if Empire Mall is one, as far as those retail centers of the city, East Side is now two with all of the nationals that have gone in there. Where is three? Is it Northwest? Is it further south? If there is a third Target, for instance, where does that go?
We just had this conversation
Yeah.
last week.
I think it's south.
Yeah. We
Follow the
both-
Walmarts.
Yeah. I mean, and I know there will be people who don't want to hear that, because we have neighborhoods that are under retailed still and would think that. But South, the demographics of South are just, they're
Yeah.
appealing.
That 85th and Minnesota corridor, I mean, if you look at the Northwest Walmart, probably does equally with they're all within about 5%, of sales. I mean, they really do well. But when we announced at 85th and Minnesota, we instantly had about $10 million in outlet sales, but now that's filling in, and certainly, you guys have some great opportunities down there just on the east side of Minnesota Avenue, and we'll start to see that. But, then we do think after that, then it will be that Northwest. And, we've got the Aldi grocery. There's some.
It's always a ripple. We got Walmart, then we get Aldi. Everybody looks at how they perform, right?
And if you just look at the planning maps, with access to water and sewer, and that's how the East Side happened. I mean, the city putting that sewer system in, opening up all that development land. Then you had all the single family developers and multifamily developers. That's always first. The retailer is never the pioneer. They don't, unless
Unless it's Walmart.
Yeah. But they need to see that housing. They need to see that all the traffic, the daily traffic. Then they come, and then you can grow upon that.
Right.
So.
Okay, when I open it for questions, which will be in about 10 minutes, I know many of you will probably have individual concepts that you're wondering about. Sometimes they can speak to those, sometimes they can't. But I do want to talk new concepts, because we've sort of gotten to the point where there's not a lot we don't have here. I mean, certainly there are still some, but retail continually is producing new concepts. So what does that interest look like from new concepts? I mean, categorically, are there some things that you can talk about that we might see land here in the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
You want to start?
I think a lot of the ones that people ask about, the Trader Joe's, the forever was Chick-fil-A, the Whole Foods, they're trying to get here, and it comes in time. It's in many cases it's distribution. Dunkin' has,
Right.
received umpteen applications for franchisees, and to them it's all distribution. And so it part of it is timing. Years ago, I mean, Fresh Time grocer was looking at the
Right.
market, and now they've kind of totally changed their strategy and say we're building these distribution centers, and you have to be within X number of miles of a distribution center because we're building our stores smaller and delivering to them more frequently. So Sioux Falls they said you're not even in our growth plan at this point. And it's and that changes over time with retailers.
And logistics in general is so challenging. I mean, good luck finding that distribution center in Sioux Falls, first of all, or even regionally.
Yes.
They're just not there.
They have to add a number of stores in a certain area all at one time. And you're kind of at the mercy of, there was, years ago, a developer that's like, oh, I'm going to bring, I'm a preferred developer for Meijer grocery stores. I'm like, where's the nearest Meijer to Sioux Falls, South Dakota?
Yeah.
So, I think, I usually look at how close is the nearest one here, and that's usually telling. And somebody wants an In-N-Out burger, it probably isn't going to happen during my lifetime in Sioux Falls, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, and in some cases, the franchising, right, plays into this too.
Yes.
I'd say a category that we did see a lot of growth in over this past year is kind of that health and beauty service, with the the eyelash places and the waxing services and
Facials.
Face Foundry and waxing the city and European wax and
bring on the nail salons. Right?
Yeah, a lot of
you guys have a space to finalize in a strip mall. We can usually tuck a nail
They never go
salon
out of
in there.
business.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to those things that people are wanting to get back out and doing for themselves and personal services, and they seem to be a little more internet proof. Those aren't things that you're getting online, and so that was a nice bump to the last year, was that personal service beauty category.
How about on the existing side? Who do we have in the market who you would see doing more stores? And then you both have extensive experience on the coffee side of things. And I do get asked how many more of XYZ coffee chain can we possibly have in town? But they're growing. I mean,
there'll be more.
There are more coming.
I chuckled a few months ago because I think you had a story about a new Starbucks and a new Little Caesars in the same week. A few years ago, Starbucks would have been, yes. And everyone's like, wow, another one. And it was, I chuckled a little bit.
Starbucks Caribou Scooter. I mean, they keep building.
But they do well here. I mean, they perform well. And I think they've proven that, the more convenient they can make locations, the more often people are going to, and it's not just coffee, Scooters. So I represent Scooters Coffee, and they tell the story how they are the #1 Red Bull account in the city of Sioux Falls because they sell Red Bull drinks kind of infused with flavors and fruit, and sell it for $5 or $6. And they sell, a couple cases of Red Bull every day out of every one of their locations. And so, but they're finding, how can we make our locations more convenient for people? And, people don't just drink coffee in the morning anymore, and they're drinking all day long and, enjoying that treat throughout the day. And
Starbucks, same thing.
Yeah, and some of it's a strategy to keep out other national competitors. I mean, there's, obviously growing coffee companies, and if they come and start to look at the market and they're not finding, large open areas that, don't have the competition so much. So they're just trying to continue to protect their market share and infill, just so that's that branding.
When we look to the future, I mean, for a while, when we had this retail conversation, it was impossible to have it without talking about workforce and hiring and the need to support all of these locations. Has that improved at all, or what are you hearing on the hiring side and the challenges that retailers are facing?
It's very real. I was working on a year ago, working on a relocation of a Subway into an end cap with a drive-through, and they weren't sure they could take on the drive-through because it required a second sandwich line and essentially a second staff, 2 more employees at any given time. And they didn't think they could staff it if they added it. And even, now some of the Subway drive-throughs, either the drive-through will be closed or the dine-in will be closed because they don't have the staff to do both at the same time. I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir to a lot of people in this room, but I mean, that's a real problem. And I'm concerned, when you have these huge employers that are yet to open in Sioux Falls.
Right.
I mean, I think that's but I think also the days of you walking into a fast food restaurant, ordering from a human I feel like those days are numbered, because, I think it's going to be you're ordering on your phone, even last year we went to Disneyland and you have to order from your phone to eat at most of those restaurants there. I think you're going to see that, going through. And I was talking to a Taco Bell franchisee, and he said the next thing you'll see robotics kind of introduced in the production area. He said, the robot will fill your drink cup, seal a plastic seal over the top, and that you can dump it upside down and it doesn't spill. And, so robots can do all that and get things like that. Right. He said, they have robots that make tacos. I mean, it's pretty interesting, but I think,
my head goes to the independent retailer, right? And having to compete with a system like that from a workforce standpoint is potentially really hard.
Yeah, the service industry has just unfortunately been, so severely hurt with the labor shortage. And I mean, we hear all the time from a lot of the businesses locally that, hey, we would love to grow. I mean, we'd love to add another store. We'd love to service that part of Sioux Falls, but they can't. They're sharing employees already. I mean, I know with some of the Starbucks, they have to close one or, just shift employees around to just try to keep things open. So
a few years back, I had a piece under land at Raquel's Crossroads development at 12th and 29 for Golden Corral, and they abandoned those plans because they said, we just can't staff it. We don't believe we'd be successful in the market staffing wise.
Well, and when you look at who is on hold post-pandemic, I mean, it is that's not necessarily a full service restaurant, but same kind of, footprint and staffing requirement. We're not seeing a lot of those nationally, are we? And what other concepts maybe are a little more challenged trying to grow now?
I'm working harder than a dog trying to get a full service restaurant to the east side to Veterans Parkway. And to convince these 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 square foot restaurants to plans, because I think they would do phenomenally well. But, the idea of staffing a whole nother store, and it's daunting to them.
That's why you don't see a lot of new Olive Gardens out there, right? Or full service steakhouses with national names.
Raquel faced that where Chase Bank ended up going at Empire.
Yeah, we lost the steakhouse.
Yeah.
And part of it was COVID and the impact that had on those people nationally that, fortunately we didn't see as much staying open and operating, which was super helpful. But it's helped us in the office market, just because a lot of companies are saying, well, they want to come to our market because they feel like we have a higher talent pool, and with labor being like it is. So we have seen a significant amount of office companies relocate to Sioux Falls to try to take advantage of that labor pool. But that's where the service industry is really being pulled from. And so now it's really, really hard for those fast food, retail, all of the hospitality. That's really a challenge.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions from all of you? I think I've left a little bit of time here. What are you wondering about? Is there someone who takes questions, or should I just call on them as we have them? Yeah. Okay, we're going to get you a microphone. Just a second. She's coming.
Dr. Pay, with all these expansions, what is the healthcare system? What are our systems going to have to do to accommodate all this development?
Well, on the real estate side of things, you both work on healthcare related deals. What kind of traction are you seeing as far as those go? I think healthcare budgets are a whole separate conversation, but are they still trying to add to support the increasing population, maybe especially on the specialty medical side?
I think you look at both Sanford and Navarra have clinics under construction on Veterans Parkway, and they're, in my experience, they're trying to serve the needs of the community and the neighborhoods.
I would say that's our hugest asset is the fact that we have those dominant healthcare systems in this market that have continued to attract talent pool, higher paying jobs, and that supports the retail, the services, but yeah, I mean, I don't know a growth area that they're not looking at and slating their future locations to service those needs. And I would say, not unlike the retail, once you see a lot of growth in a particular area, that's where they're saying, okay, we need to be convenient to the residents. And, so they've been some of the first to identify. And fortunately, we do get a lot of people looking at land around their facilities too, just because of the draw that they create and also the captive audience for ancillary services.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of land that is owned by the health systems and not built on yet.
Yeah.
So
it's a pretty common trend as you look at any retail development, both in our market and others within the last 15 years. Almost always you see some sort of medical component to it. Medical and retail, they play very nice with each other. Medical drives a lot of daily traffic and complements retail very well.
And people from smaller markets, that come to these medical facilities. So sometimes, they're having somebody that they're with be checked in for 3-4. So then they're in the restaurants and in the shops and getting things done. So I think convenience is very important, and you'll continue to see that.
Lauren Boyens, I'd be curious to hear what you think that the city should build next to the parking ramp that didn't get built a couple of years ago. What would be your suggestions?
Thanks for that, and for reminding me that we did not talk about downtown retail. So maybe talk a little bit about the opportunities of that site, but also the momentum that you're seeing.
I have a second question.
Okay.
So with the number of multi-use facilities being built, that is retail, office, and residential, how is that going for the city? And is that model going to continue?
Okay, so the downtown site and mixed
You want
use.
to take the first one and I'll talk mixed use?
I'm trying to remember the question.
Oh, the parking ramp, the underutilized parking ramp potential, and then just downtown retail in general, your take on that?
I think that downtown site is a great opportunity for a developer, whoever ends up doing it. I think, fantastic location, kind of the first thing you see as you drive into downtown. I admittedly haven't followed that whole story terribly closely, but I think when the time comes that the city opens that up, and I think they're starting some of those conversations, that there is going to be an opportunity there. And, because a lot of that small retail there, it wasn't that long ago that, downtown Sioux Falls, started the retail incubator program, and the sky was falling and Phillips Avenue was emptying out, and man, that turned 180 really fast. And then it was, you couldn't find space on Phillips Avenue. You couldn't find space downtown. Buildings were selling at just super premiums and continue to. So, I mean, it's, downtown has definitely found that momentum. And then to now look at what Lloyd is doing on kind of the whole north end of downtown. I mean, pretty phenomenal stuff.
And Raquel, the mixed use and the take on that, successful?
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a model that does work. It's, you have that structure, you have the ability to have the residents with the services and the retail down below. I mean, there's certainly synergies there, and certain businesses that like to locate in those environments just to have that built-in clientele, a hair salon, a cafe, certainly the Cascade is, having the brewery and Papa Woody's and those, concepts. And the 85th in Minnesota, down by the Walmart, we're going to be filling that main level with more service use, and then and it also from a development standpoint, operationally with some of the cost sharing between, having that parking facility where your residents are contributing to that, and then during the day, the commercial users. So you're kind of seeing that cost sharing with taxes and operating expenses. And, generally a retailer, they don't care if it's base rent or, part of their operating costs. It's just all, operating expenses toward their occupancy. So, you want to try to keep those operating expenses as low as you can to try to protect the vacancy and keep your businesses successful in those buildings. And when you're sharing some of those costs, it really does help lower those occupancy. Yep. And downtown retail, I mean, I would say right now, it's been going very, very well. We continue to see new concepts that specifically want that type of environment. I'm working with somebody right now. We did some touring, and they want something kind of, they're a boutique, but they want something kind of warehousey and more kind of urban. And so we're having to try to create those new environments to meet that demand. But Phillips Avenue is just done quite well. And even the conversion of like the Johnson building from Sioux Falls Ministries,
Right.
We've been able to get a really unique mix of tenants for that building. So
Cat Cafe.
Cat
Home of the
Cafe.
future Cat Cafe.
People talked about it all weekend.
Most popular
so.
story of the week. Cat Cafe. We have time for one more question, maybe. Yeah.
Hey guys, so it looks like we're gonna have another record year of building. My question is really, are there any kind of risk on the horizon, storm clouds, in terms of being able to fill up everything that's getting built, in terms of absorption? I see tons of spec strip malls getting built. Everybody, including us, is building more multifamily, a lot more downtown retail and office. That's like if you're Eide Bailey and you're moving out of Riverview Square into Sharapa 2, that's going to leave more kind of downtown vacant office space. Are there any kind of categories or that are really at risk for absorption and stuff that might sit empty for a while?
I don't feel like there's a lot of developers speculating on a ton of retail space. In most cases, something is 50% or 100% full before breaking ground. I am leasing up a new retail center at 69th and Cliff, where Raquel brought a Starbucks. Zach Negabow put a year-round Brown in there, a nail salon, and then we, the last spot in the building, we just accepted an LOI last week with another national franchise to take the last space. So, you see
I
these.
heard rumblings about that one.
Yeah, and it's an exciting tenant.
New concept, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's fun to see, these new projects, really stabilizing rather quickly in our market. Back through 2020, a lot of the new retail built in front of the Walmart at 85th in Minnesota, some of that sat really, that vacancy was very quiet because a lot of leasing, especially retail leasing, just ground to a halt in 2020 for several months. But then as, everyone got out again and things got more back to normal, that shopping center is essentially fully leased. The last space now is under LOI. So,
And even the land out there, there's not
Right.
much left.
right.
Mhm.
So I don't feel like you're going to see a lot of speculation. Your point of, large office users relocating, leaving a vacancy, definitely a real, there's going to be some work to be done to backfill some of that space.
Although I'm kind of excited because you need that variation of product and price point. And, right now downtown is so tight. It's too tight.
Right.
So it's tough to find opportunities. So having something like that now, isn't a Sharapa Steel District pricing. It's second generation space, and not every company is looking for that type of space. So it is allowing us to have a little bit more breathing room in the market and opportunities to fit some people. But if I didn't say I wake up every day going, how are we going to fill all the space? Okay,
Yeah.
I'd be lying. But somehow, some way, fortunately, we have such a great business climate, and companies such as yourself and all. As I look around, just an amazing group of growing, good operating businesses that make this community what it is.
Good note to end on. Okay, please help me thank our panelists. This was a fun conversation. Thank you guys.
I'm certainly leaving today with a sense of optimism, and once again, so proud to be part of Sioux Falls, especially now. So thank you both for your contribution to that and for you as well, Jodi. We're so glad to have you here. Next week, we've already teased this out a little bit because of one of our guests today. August 22nd, Innovation in Higher Education, Responding to Changes and Challenges. We will have President Griggs with Southeast Tech, Jay Perry with the University of South Dakota, Sioux Falls, and President Dunn with South Dakota State University. We hope to see you then. Rotary is adjourned.